Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and Black History Month is live and in full effect in this sudsy matchup where I put Michael Schultz's Car Wash against DJ Pooh's The Wash. And this one was a real fun one to get to. But let's just dive right on into it. First up, we have Michael Schultz's Car Wash, which was written by Joel Schumacher. And the film is basically a day in the life of this car wash, all the motherfuckers that work in it and shit like that. And it definitely has an ensemble of colorful characters and stuff. But the thing about Car Wash is it's one of those movies that doesn't really know what the fuck it wants to be. It doesn't know if it wants to be just a silly slapstick comedy or like a fucking issue drama. It's got a little bit of everything in it. It feels like Joel Schumacher was trying to like basically get every single trope of the mid 1970s into one fucking day in the life comedy and shit. And of course, like, you get to see all sides of the spectrum. You get Antonio Vargas as a trainee that works at the car wash, and you got Bill Duke who does give an excellent performance in the film as a kind of a black revolutionary, like Nation of Islam type motherfucker. And you got Ivan Dixon as a man that's on parole and stuff. And he's kind of like the weathered wise dude and stuff. And you got the owner, which is the motherfucker from Dog Day Afternoon that's in the bank, and a bank manager, whatever the fuck his title was in that movie and shit. And of course he's got a little side plot with the fucking receptionist chick. They're fucking on the low. But of course, like, she actually finds some good dick in the film, and so, but then you got like a lot of other like dreamers and shit. Like, you got the dude that has the fucking superhero comic book shit that he's making, that he calls himself the Fly and stuff. He's trying to bang the hot waitress across the way at that diner and stuff, and he eventually gets with her, because when he's trying to win those tickets for the disco dance hall. One of the things though that Car Wash does do great is the music in the film. It does have a great soundtrack. Of course, the title song by Rolls Royce, Car Wash, is really fun and stuff. And like the way they use the radio to kind of like move about the day is done very well. And, of course, we've also got like some heavy hitters in this film, like Richard Pryor, who plays like a kind of an evangelist type motherfucker, Danny Rich, and but he's only in it for like 5 minutes. He's got the Pointer Sisters as his entourage and stuff, and of course they got a little singing number in this film. That's the one thing about this film too. It's almost a half-ass musical and shit. So in a way, this isn't really like an accurate representation of like motherfuckers working at a car wash. They get into all kinds of silly antics and shit. And and of course you got George Carlin as a taxi cab driver who's kind of lame in the film. Most of the jokes that he has in it doesn't land, but that's probably not his fault. I don't think he may not have wrote his own material and shit. But like I said, the film itself does not really know what the fuck it wants to be, because there are like moments that are really serious, dealing with like, especially with Bill Duke and Ivan Dixon at the end, where Bill Duke tries to hold up the car wash and shit, and they have the kind of a heart to heart, and then it just ends with, the end credit sequence is pretty great and stuff. You also have an appearance by Lorraine Gary, who of course was the wife in Jaws, and she has but that part's pretty funny. But like I said, most of the funny moments in this film are like few and far between, and a lot of it's shit like real random, like something serious will happen, and then all of a sudden, there's dog shit that they gotta clean up, or there's fucking like somebody's got a bottle of piss that they think it's a bomb and shit. So it's like a lot of lame shit happens in this film, other than the soundtrack and a couple of good performances, and like seeing motherfuckers like Richard Pryor in it. It does kind of basically kind of a time capsule for this time, for 1976 or 75 or 6, whenever the fuck this movie came out. Like I said, every trope of that time period is on display here. You even got a motherfucker they call Geronimo that's just like kind of in Indian garb and shit, and a couple of Mexican cats and shit. There's a burrito scene too, where motherfucker puts a lot of fucking spices in the burrito and shit. So basic as fuck. And then we move forward to DJ Pooh's The Wash, starring Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, of course, one of the greatest duos of all time, and they finally got to be in a film together. And the cool thing about The Wash is is that Dr. Dre is the only motherfucker playing against type because he's such a bitch in the film, you know. But that shows that, you know, the motherfucker wasn't just one of the greatest producers of all time. He could actually half-ass act in a movie. And of course, Snoop Dogg definitely playing up his persona and shit. And of course, the Snoop Dogg works at the car wash known as The Wash, owned by the great George Wallace, one of the funniest motherfuckers alive to ever live, you know. And, you know, and his name's Washington. And Dr. Dre, you know, he's kind of having a hard time. You know, he ain't got a job, so he's got a boot on his car, can't even pay his half of the rent. So he ends up getting a job as the assistant manager at the Wash where Snoop Dogg works, and that's where the rift between them begins. This film is not a day in the life film. This is more kind of a buddy comedy that deals with a lot of it's a little more of an accurate representation of like motherfuckers working at a car wash. I mean, you got fucking Debo's in this working at the car wash, and you know, a bunch of other motherfuckers. And the cameos in this film are a lot better too, because like, I mean, half the cast is fucking rappers. You got Eminem playing a fucking psycho, and you also got like Ludacris pops up in it, Exhibit as well, you know, and you know, and shit, even Shaquille O'Neal makes an appearance in this motherfucker knocking somebody the fuck out. But the film itself is way funnier than Car Wash, because the thing about The Wash is it knows exactly what it is and what it's trying to be. Like, it's just kind of a silly comedy, definitely in the tradition of something like Friday, and you know, just a real fun kind of stoner comedy, if you will, because of course anything with Snoop Dogg, there's going to be a lot of weed smoked in the motherfucker and stuff. And of course there is like kind of a plot too, you know, because of course the call to action is when George Wallace gets kidnapped by these two dumbass hood rat motherfuckers, and they end up fucking, you know, saving him from that shit, because they're some of the dumbest kidnappers that ever lived. But I mean, that whole situation is just fucking hilarious. You know, they got like probably the fattest security guard that I've ever seen in a fucking movie, you know, but you know, shit pops off in the end, you know, it's just everything you kind of want in this kind of movie. So, I mean, there's really nothing I can say bad about this movie. There's nothing that you can really critique on it, because they're not trying to dive in social issues or anything. You know, they're just, this is a movie where you can just have fun, put this shit on and enjoy this shit and not have to think about shit. And also, there ain't no dumb, like, silly ass musical numbers. The closest thing to a fucking musical number in the movie is where Snoop Dogg's having that daydream about having all the bikini, the big booty women in tiny bikinis washing the cars and shit. And you know, who doesn't love ass and titties, you know? So I mean, this round clearly has to go to The Wash, because you know, it's a movie that's just not on some bullshit. It's not trying to be anything other than just a fun stoner comedy. And you know what, the soundtrack might even be better. You know, the soundtrack is mostly hip-hop tracks, of course, you know, and it's honestly kind of funny when you see, like, you know, Dr. Dre bitching about the music being too loud, and it's his own fucking music, you know. There's a lot of like meta moments in this shit, like even the kidnappers reading the magazine and like Snoop Dogg's on the cover of it, you know. It's just very lot of tongue-in-cheek meta references in this shit, but they don't really play that up too much. It's just kind of like, you just shit that you notice, you know. A lot of fat booties in the movie too. Like the receptionist is fucking hot as shit. She is absolutely gorgeous. And like I said, this movie is fun as fuck. You know, definitely beats Car Wash by a fucking mile as far as the laughs per minute department, you know, because plus like Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, you know, their whole back and forth is some funny shit. And also when Debo throws that motherfucker into the car, that's fucking hilarious too. And like Ludacris bitching at the dude for putting Windex on his rims and shit. You know, there's just like I said, plenty of funny moments that kind of stay in its lane. The closest you get to shit humor in this movie is with Dr. Dre eats that fucking burrito from that Roach coach. And it's like, got the, what's the matter? You got the bubblies? You know, like I said, this round goes to The Wash. And for anybody keeping score, that is 76-63. 70s are only up by 13, man. The 90s have been kicking mucho ass. That streak is just continuing on and seems to be holding strong. So, you know, who knows, man? They could get to the point where they overtake the 70s. But right now, 70s are still up by 13. But the 90s, they keep coming back with them 1-2 punches. Mainly because there were certain times. And I guess it also does kind of contribute to the fact that, you know, that these movies like The Wash were like kind of written for and by black people, as opposed to like having a white man write a script like Car Wash and try to make it as hip as possible. Whereas like DJ Pooh wrote and directed this movie, he didn't even really have to try to be hip. You know, it just made a fucking movie that was funny and entertaining. So if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. This is just one asshole's opinion about which decade is better, the 70s or the 90s. This is a long, self-indulgent academic journey. I watch all these movies. I watch them back to back just to make sure that I'm right at which one is better. You know, when you stack them up together by themselves, like, oh, okay, it's not that bad of a movie. But when you put them together, it's like, you know, you kind of understand, you see the weaknesses and the flaws and shit, and you ain't being gaslit. You know, the gaslighting stops with this fucking series. So if you're tired of being gaslit, definitely stay tuned for this series. Our next main event, we continue on with the Black History Month series. You know, the next main event is Lady Sings the Blues versus What's Love Got to Do with It. So that should be an exciting one. Score is 76-63. Stay tuned for that. You know, this is what it sounds like when film bros cry.